Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-sok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good afternoon. Thank you as always for coming on the program.
Happy to be here.
Well, let's start with the U.S., where the trading week was a little shorter because of Thanksgiving on Thursday. The big question, though, is what retail sales will show for Black Friday, when there are big sales, of course, online and in stores. The markets were mixed for the day. The Dow higher, the Nasdaq lower. What's the story in the global markets as we start a new week?
Okay, well, as you said, it was a very short trading week. But for the week, even though they had a mixed Friday, for the week, they did fairly well. Dow went up by 1.8%, S&P went up by 1.5%, and Nasdaq went up by 0.72%. And year to date, Dow is surprisingly only down 6.1%. S&P is down 16.1%, and Nasdaq is down by 29%. So Dow, which includes the top blue chip stocks, they're actually doing very well, whereas the tech stocks, Nasdaq, is not doing very well, and that's typical when we have rising interest rates and possibility of a recession on the horizon. Now, there was both sort of good news and bad news in the U.S. economy last week. The Fed minutes were released, and there seems to be now more differences between hawks and doves, even though they do agree that in the short run, interest rates should continue to rise. But in the long term, maybe next year, the hawks are now saying that doves are saying that interest rate rise should slow down, and that seems to be giving hope for stock investors. However, during the Thanksgiving break, consumer spending seems very strong. Black Friday online sales are now topping $9.1 billion US, 2.3% over last year. Buy now, pay later payments increased by 78% compared to last week. So there seems to be still a very strong consumption trend in the U.S. Then there was a failure agreement by G20 countries, European Union, on oil price cap for Russian oil. The talks will continue, but this is a bit of a good news. The oil prices, as measured by West Texas Intermediate, was down to $76.28. That's due to concerns about global recession and recession due to zero COVID policy in China. Natural gas, though, is a little bit up, $7.02 per million BTUs. It's been slightly rising in the last week. For European stocks, on Friday, DAX, FTSE, and CAC all went up a little bit. Today, the markets haven't opened except for FTSE, and that's slightly up. UK is now seems to be heading for a deep recession, but European recession may be lighter than expected. The German third quarter growth was 0.4% quarter to quarter, 1.3% over 12 months. That's slightly higher than preliminary, but it's still somewhat less than what people feared. And the European winter was warmer than expected, so the oil demand is not as high as expected, and that's giving some optimism on the European side, even though they will get into a recession. On the Asian front, today, Nikkei, Shanghai, and Hang Seng all went down. Hang Seng went down by 1.6%, so their trading hasn't finished yet. But that seems to be due to China's continuing zero COVID policy, which may paralyze the economy. There's also some protest and unrest against the zero COVID policy, and the Tokyo core inflation is now highest in 40 years, 3.6% in November on annualized basis. That's higher than expected, and that seems to be causing a negative trend in the Asian market.
Well, now here in Korea, stocks were lower as well, led by the big chip makers and also bio concerns, of course, over what's happening in China with COVID, whether those protests you mentioned will lead to anything in terms of a loosening of the rules. We'll see. But retail investors were net buyers today. We're still seeing some strength in shares of entertainment companies. Tell us about the domestic market.
Okay, well, let's start with last week. Kospi went down by 0.27%, but Kosdaq went up by 0.22%. Korean won depreciated by 0.37%. The Kospi today, it's minus 1.2%. It ended today at 2,409.08. Individual spot, institutions and foreigners sold. Kosdaq went down by 2.07%. It ended today at 718.40. Again, individual spot and institutions and foreigners sold. The downward trend is thought to be due to, as you said, the protest in China, as well as selling by foreign investors. And we're in the corporate earnings seasons now for next year, but the estimate that the analysts are giving for corporate earnings for the next year, there's a very wide range, and different analysts are giving different numbers. Some are positive, some are negative. So next year is proving to be very hard to estimate, and that may be behind the sort of the roller coaster market or the mixed results that we've been seeing lately. For the month, Kospi has went up by 4.7%. Kosdaq has went up by 3.2% over the month. But year to date, Kospi is down 19.6%, and Kosdaq for the year is down 30.9%. Korean won depreciated by 0.16% today, and it ended at 1340.20. Year to date, it's depreciated by about 12.8%, and that's pretty much in the middle of the currency pack. The euro depreciated by 9.2% over the last year. Great British Pound year to date, they depreciated by about 11.9%. Japanese yen depreciated by about 20.9%. So Korea is now more or less returned to the middle of the pack in terms of depreciation against the dollar.
Got it. All right, Professor, up against the clock today. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, as always, for coming on the program, and we'll have you on again later this week.
Thank you.